The snow fell in thick, heavy sheets as Andre Wilson gripped his steering wheel, straining to see through the windshield. His wipers worked overtime, barely keeping up with the relentless blizzard. It was nearly midnight, and after working a grueling 16-hour shift at Memorial Hospital, his eyes burned with exhaustion. Just 20 more minutes and he'd be home, able to sink into his bed before doing it all over again tomorrow. Andre had been an emergency room nurse for 8 years now. He loved his job despite the challenges, the understaffing, the long hours, the emotional toll. Tonight had been particularly rough. 3 car accidents, a heart attack, and a 5-year-old with pneumonia. He'd barely had time to eat. The road ahead was deserted, most people having the good sense to stay home during the worst snowstorm their town had seen in decades. The radio weatherman called it the big one, warning everyone to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary. As Andre rounded a sharp bend on the rural highway, his headlights caught something, a gleam of metal in the snowbank about 50 yards ahead. Slowing down, he squinted through the swirling white. It was a car halfway in the ditch, its hazard lights blinking weakly. Beside it, a figure waved arms desperately. "You've got to be kidding me," Andre muttered, checking his watch. It was late, he was exhausted, and the temperature had dropped well below freezing. Every part of him wanted to keep driving, but he couldn't. 8 years of helping people in crisis had hardened many things about him, but not his fundamental nature. With a deep sigh, Andre carefully pulled over, keeping a safe distance from the edge of the road. He grabbed his heavy coat from the back seat and the emergency kit he always kept in his car. The wind hit him like a physical blow when he stepped outside. Snow immediately coated his shoulders and hat as he trudged toward the stranded vehicle. It was an older model luxury car, a Cadillac, he thought, though it was hard to tell under the snow. As he got closer, he could see an elderly man standing beside it, shivering violently in what looked like a thin overcoat completely unsuitable for this weather. "Are you okay?" Andre called out over the howling wind. The old man turned, relief washing over his weathered face. He was tall and thin, with a shock of white hair peeking out from under a flat cap. His complexion was pale, almost blue around the lips, not a good sign. "Oh, thank heavens," the man said, his voice trembling. "I've been stuck for nearly an hour. My phone's dead and I haven't seen another car until you." Andre quickly assessed the situation. The Cadillac had slid off the road, its back wheels spinning uselessly in the deep snow. The front bumper was pressed against a tree, though there didn't appear to be significant damage. "I'm Andre," he said, extending a gloved hand. "Let's get you warmed up first, and then we'll figure out what to do about your car." "Thomas," the old man replied, his handshake surprisingly firm despite his shivering. "Thomas Grant. I can't tell you how grateful I am to see another human being out here." Andre led Thomas back to his car, cranking the heat to full blast once they were inside. He grabbed an emergency blanket from his kit and wrapped it around the old man's shoulders. "You're in the early stages of hypothermia," Andre explained, noting the man's violent shivering and confused expression. "How long were you standing out there?" "Not sure exactly," Thomas admitted, his teeth chattering. "After I skidded off the road, I tried to dig myself out for a while. Then I tried walking, but the snow was too deep. Eventually, I just stood by the car hoping someone would come along." Andre reached into his backpack and pulled out a thermos. "It's just coffee, but it's still hot." "Small sips, okay?" Thomas nodded gratefully, wrapping his trembling hands around the thermos. As color slowly returned to his face, Andre studied him more closely. Despite his obviously expensive car, Thomas was dressed simply. Worn corduroys, a button-up shirt, and that inadequate overcoat. His shoes were quality leather but scuffed with age. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed money. Just an ordinary old man caught in a bad situation. "Where were you headed in this weather, if you don't mind me asking?" Andre said, turning down the blaring heat now that the car had warmed up. Thomas took another sip of coffee before answering. "My sister's place. She's not well, and I wanted to check on her. The forecast didn't seem this bad when I left the city this morning." He glanced out at his stranded Cadillac. "I should have known better at my age. Not as sharp as I used to be, I suppose." Andre pulled out his phone. "Let me call a tow truck for you." After 3 tries to different companies, the answer was the same. No tow trucks were operating in the blizzard. The earliest anyone could help would be tomorrow afternoon, assuming the storm let up by then. "Looks like we're out of luck tonight," Andre said, pocketing his phone. "Where's your sister's place? Maybe I can drop you there." Thomas looked embarrassed. It's nearly 2 hours north of here. I couldn't possibly ask you to drive all that way in this weather, especially this late. Andre checked the weather app on his phone and frowned. The storm was only getting worse, with another 8 to 10 inches expected by morning. The highway ahead was now marked in red, multiple accidents reported. I don't think any of us should be on these roads much longer, he admitted. Look, my apartment is about 15 minutes from here. Why don't you come stay the night and we'll figure things out in the morning when the plows have been through? Thomas's eyes widened in surprise. You'd do that for a complete stranger? Andre shrugged. I'd hope someone would do the same for me. Or for my grandpa. He put the car in drive and carefully pulled back onto the road. We should call your sister, though, let her know you're okay. Thomas looked down at his hands. She's expecting me tomorrow, not tonight. She takes medication that puts her to sleep early. I don't want to worry her with all this. As they drove through the worsening storm, conversation came surprisingly easy. Andre learned that Thomas was 78, retired, and had lived alone since his wife passed 5 years ago. He didn't mention what he had done before retirement, and Andre didn't ask. Thomas asked about Andre's work as a nurse, listening with genuine interest as Andre described the challenges of emergency medicine. It sounds rewarding. Despite the difficulties, Thomas remarked. Andre nodded. It is. Though lately I've been thinking about a change. Not leaving nursing, but maybe focusing on community care. He surprised himself by continuing. There's this old storefront in my neighborhood that would make a perfect community health clinic. Place where people without insurance could get basic care, vaccinations, health education. The kind of place that could prevent some of the emergencies I see every day. Why haven't you pursued it? Thomas asked. Andre laughed without humor. Money mostly. The building alone would cost more than I'll make in the next decade. Not to mention equipment, staff, insurance. Thomas nodded thoughtfully, but said nothing more on the subject. By the time they reached Andre's apartment building, the snow had piled nearly a foot high on the sidewalks. Andre parked in his assigned spot and helped Thomas, who was still unsteady, navigate the short but treacherous walk to the entrance. The old man moved carefully, leaning on Andre's arm for support. Andre's apartment was on the 3rd floor, a modest 2-bedroom place that he kept tidy but simple. He'd taken the 2nd bedroom for a home office, but the futon there could fold out into a decent bed. It's not much, Andre said as he unlocked the door, suddenly aware of how plain his home must seem compared to what Thomas might be used to, judging by his car. But Thomas looked around with appreciation. It's warm and dry, which makes it paradise compared to where I was an hour ago. While Thomas showered to fully warm up, Andre quickly changed the sheets on the futon and laid out a spare toothbrush and towel. He found an old pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt that might fit the taller, thinner man and left them folded outside the bathroom door. Later, they sat at Andre's small kitchen table, eating reheated soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside it was warm, the simple meal surprisingly satisfying after the night's adventure. I can't thank you enough, Thomas said, finishing his soup. You've shown extraordinary kindness to a foolish old man. Andre waved away the thanks. Anyone would have stopped. Thomas shook his head. No, they wouldn't have. Not on a night like this, not when they were as tired as you clearly are. His eyes, pale blue and surprisingly sharp, studied Andre with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. People like you are rare, son. Andre didn't know how to respond to that, so he just collected their empty bowls and put them in the sink. We should both get some sleep. Tomorrow we can figure out what to do about your car. As he showed Thomas to the makeshift bed, the old man paused at the door. I have a feeling things are going to work out just fine, he said with a cryptic smile. Andre nodded, too exhausted to puzzle over the odd comment. As he finally collapsed into his own bed, the last thing he thought before drifting off was how strange life could be. Just hours ago, he was elbow-deep in an emergency trauma, and now he had a stranded stranger sleeping in his apartment. What he didn't know was that this chance encounter in a snowstorm was about to change everything. Andre woke to the smell of coffee brewing. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't figure out why. He lived alone and certainly didn't own any coffee maker with a timer. Tea. And the events of the previous night came flooding back. The stranded old man. The blizzard. The rescue. He glanced at his phone. 10:27 a.m. He'd slept far later than intended, his body desperately catching up after weeks of overtime shifts. Throwing on a t-shirt, he padded into the kitchen to find Thomas standing at the stove, spatula in hand. "Hope you don't mind," the old man said, gesturing to the frying pan where eggs sizzled. "I found some groceries and thought I'd make myself useful." Andre blinked in surprise. His refrigerator had been nearly empty last time he checked, a sad testament to his grueling work schedule and lack of home life. "I walked to the corner store," Thomas explained, noticing Andre's confusion. "It opened at 9. The sidewalks are somewhat clear, though the roads are still a mess." He nodded toward the window where bright sunshine reflected off mountains of snow. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed white landscape. "You didn't have to do that," Andre said, accepting the mug of coffee Thomas handed him. Thomas shrugged. "Seemed like the least I could do. Besides, I've been up since 6, old habit I can't shake. Too many years of early mornings." As they ate breakfast, perfectly cooked eggs, bacon, and toast with the fresh groceries Thomas had bought, Andre learned more about his unexpected guest. Thomas had been a widower for 5 years, his wife having passed from cancer. They'd never had children, something he occasionally regretted. His sister was his only close family, and at 82, her health was failing. "What about you?" Thomas asked, refilling their coffee cups. "Any family nearby?" Andre shook his head. "My parents are in Georgia. I moved here for nursing school 12 years ago and just stayed. There was more work here, better pay." He paused, then added, "I try to visit them once a year, but with hospital staffing what it is. Must get lonely," Thomas observed. Andre had never really thought about it that way. "I guess I'm just used to it. The emergency room keeps me busy. There's always overtime available, and the team there is like a family of sorts." Thomas studied him with those keen eyes that seemed to see more than Andre was comfortable sharing. "All work and no play, though? No special someone? No hobbies?" Andre laughed, suddenly self-conscious. "Not much time for dating. As for hobbies?" He glanced around his apartment, which held little evidence of any personal life. No musical instruments, no sports equipment, no collections or crafts. Just medical textbooks, a few plants, and a TV he rarely watched. "I run sometimes. When the weather's good." After breakfast, they called about Thomas's car. The towing company reported that the main roads were being cleared, but it would be at least afternoon before they could reach the rural highway where the Cadillac had slid off the road. "Looks like you're stuck with me a bit longer," Thomas said. "Unless you need to work today." Andre checked his phone. 3 texts from the hospital asking if he could come in for another double shift. After a moment's hesitation, he texted back that he couldn't. It was the first time in months he'd turned down overtime. "I'm off today," he told Thomas. "Actually, I have the next 2 days off." A rare luxury scheduled only because he'd worked 20 days straight before that. "Perfect," Thomas said, clapping his hands together. "Then perhaps you can show me around your neighborhood. I'd like to see this storefront you mentioned, the one that would make a good community clinic." Andre was surprised Thomas remembered that detail from their conversation during the drive. "It's nothing special," he said. "Just a pipe dream, really." "Sometimes dreams are worth exploring," Thomas replied. "And I could use the exercise after being cooped up in that car yesterday." The temperature had risen slightly, making their walk through the snow-covered neighborhood pleasant despite the lingering chill. Andre's apartment was in a working-class area that had seen better days. Many storefronts were vacant, their windows papered over or covered with metal security gates. Still, there were signs of community everywhere. Murals on the sides of buildings, a community garden buried under snow, people shoveling each other's walkways. "It's not much," Andre said as they walked, suddenly seeing his neighborhood through a stranger's eyes. "But the people here look out for each other." Thomas nodded approvingly. "That's rare these days. Communities like this have character." As they turned onto the main street, Andre pointed to a vacant corner building with large windows. Once a hardware store, it had been empty for nearly 2 years. A faded "for lease" sign hung crooked in the window. "That's it," Andre said. "The clinic space I was talking about. It's got good bones, plenty of natural light. The back area could be divided into exam rooms, and the front would make a perfect waiting area and education space." Thomas walked up to the windows, cupping his hands around his eyes to peer inside. "How much are they asking for it?" "Last I heard, $350,000 to buy or $4,200 a month to lease," Andre said. "Plus it needs at least $150,000 in renovations to meet medical facility codes. Then there's equipment, staff salaries, insurance." He sighed. Like I said, pipe dream. Dreams have a way of coming true sometimes, Thomas said, still studying the building with interest. With the right plan and the right people behind them, they continued their walk, stopping at a small cafe for lunch. To Andre's surprise, Thomas insisted on paying, pulling out a worn leather wallet with cash that he counted carefully. It struck Andre as the habit of someone who watched their spending closely. I never asked what you did before retirement, Andre said as they sipped hot chocolate to warm up after their walk. Thomas seemed to consider the question carefully before answering. A little of this, a little of that. Mostly investing, finding promising ideas and helping them grow. Successful? Andre asked. Thomas smiled. I've been fortunate. But money isn't everything, as I'm sure you know. It's what you do with it that matters. After lunch, they returned to the apartment to find a message from the towing company. The Cadillac had been recovered and taken to a garage, but the mechanic wouldn't be able to look at it until tomorrow. The good news was that the damage appeared minimal, mostly just a dented bumper. Looks like you're stuck with me another night, Thomas said. If that's all right with you, I can find a hotel if you prefer. Andre waved off the suggestion. Don't be ridiculous. The futon can't be that comfortable, but it's better than paying for a hotel room for one more night. That evening, they cooked dinner together with the groceries Thomas had bought. The old man moved with surprising efficiency in the kitchen, dicing vegetables and seasoning the simple stir-fry they prepared. As they ate, Thomas asked more questions about Andre's dream of opening a community clinic. The neighborhood needs it, Andre explained, warming to the subject. We've got a lot of people here working multiple jobs, no health insurance, using the ER as primary care because they have no other options. A sliding scale clinic could change that. Preventative care, chronic disease management, health education. You've clearly given this a lot of thought, Thomas observed. Andre nodded. I keep a folder of ideas, floor plans, equipment lists, staffing requirements, grant opportunities. Just daydreaming, really. But it helps me get through tough shifts when I can imagine something better. May I see this folder? Thomas asked. Slightly embarrassed, Andre retrieved his laptop and opened a digital folder labeled Community Health Project. Inside were dozens of files, research papers, rough business plans, sketches of possible clinic layouts, lists of potential funding sources. Thomas scrolled through the documents with interest. This is impressive, Andre, much more than daydreaming. You've done real homework here, Andre shrugged. Doesn't matter how good the plan is if you don't have the capital to make it happen. Thomas closed the laptop and fixed Andre with a thoughtful look. You know, I've met many successful people in my life. Do you know what separates those who achieve their dreams from those who don't? Money? Andre suggested with a wry smile. Thomas shook his head. Persistence. The willingness to take that first step, even when the whole staircase isn't visible. You've got a solid vision here. The money, that can be figured out. Andre wasn't convinced, but he appreciated the old man's encouragement. As they cleaned up after dinner, he found himself enjoying the company. It had been a long time since he'd had a real conversation with someone that wasn't about work or small talk. Later that night, as Andre was getting ready for bed, Thomas called him into the living room. The old man was standing by the window looking out at the neighborhood, now peaceful under its blanket of snow. Thank you, Thomas said simply. For what? Andre asked. For stopping last night. For bringing me into your home. For showing me your neighborhood today. Thomas turned to face him. Not everyone would have done that. Andre shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Just doing what anyone would do. Thomas smiled. We both know that's not true. There's something special about people who can see beyond themselves, who understand that we're all connected in this life. He paused, then added, I have a feeling our paths crossing wasn't an accident. Andre. Something in the old man's tone made Andre pause. There was a certainty there, a hint of something larger at work. But before he could ask what Thomas meant, the old man yawned dramatically. Forgive me, he said. An old man needs his rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. As Andre lay in bed that night, he found himself wondering about Thomas Grant. There was something peculiar about the old man, a wisdom and perspective that seemed unusual. And despite his apparent age and the ordeal he'd been through, he seemed remarkably energetic and sharp. Little did Andre know that in the quiet of the night, Thomas was making a phone call, one that would change everything. The morning sun streamed through the blinds as Andre woke to the now familiar smell of coffee brewing. He smiled, realizing he could get used to having someone else make breakfast. The past 2 days with Thomas had been unexpectedly pleasant, a break from his usual routine of work, sleep, and more work. He found the old man at the kitchen table, newspaper spread out before him, pen in hand as he worked on the crossword puzzle. 7 down, Thomas said without looking up. 6 letters, provides care and comfort. I was thinking doctor, but it doesn't fit. Nurse, Andre suggested, pouring himself coffee. Thomas smiled, filling in the letters. Of course, staring me right in the face. He folded the newspaper and set it aside. The garage called. They fixed the dent in my car and checked the alignment. Everything's good to go. I can pick it up this afternoon. Andre felt a strange disappointment. So I guess you'll be heading to your sister's place after that. Thomas nodded slowly. I should. She'll be wondering where I am. He paused, studying Andre's face. Though I admit I've enjoyed our time together more than I expected. Me too, Andre said, surprised by his own honesty. It's been nice having someone to talk to. They decided to spend the morning exploring more of the neighborhood before Thomas had to leave. The snow had begun to melt, making the sidewalks slushy but passable. As they walked, Thomas asked more questions about Andre's work at the hospital and his dream of opening a community clinic. You know, Thomas said as they passed the vacant storefront that Andre had his eye on. I've been thinking about your clinic idea. It's really quite remarkable, Andre shrugged. Lots of people have good ideas. Execution is the hard part. True, Thomas agreed. But you've done more planning than most, and you understand the community's needs firsthand. He stopped walking, turning to face Andre directly. Would you mind if I made a few calls? I know some people in healthcare investment who might find your project interesting. Andre blinked in surprise. You'd do that for me? You barely know me. Thomas smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I'm a pretty good judge of character, Andre, always have been. It's how I've survived in business all these years. He patted Andre's shoulder. Besides, it wouldn't be charity. A well-run community clinic with the right leadership could be sustainable and even profitable in the long run, while doing tremendous good. Andre wasn't sure how to respond. After years of keeping his dream mostly to himself, the idea of sharing it with potential investors was both exciting and terrifying. Think about it, Thomas said, seeming to sense his hesitation. No pressure. But sometimes opportunities appear when we least expect them. They continued their walk, stopping at a small diner for lunch. The place was packed with locals, many still talking about the recent blizzard and its aftermath. Andre knew most of the staff by name, having treated their various injuries and illnesses in the ER over the years. Well, look who it is, called out the waitress, a woman in her 50s with hair dyed a vibrant purple. Haven't seen you in weeks, Andre. Too good for us now? Andre laughed. Just working too much, Bev, the usual, please. And for your friend? She asked, eyeing Thomas with friendly curiosity. I'll have whatever he's having, Thomas said with a warm smile. After she left, Thomas leaned forward. You seem to know everyone around here. Hazard of being an ER nurse, Andre explained. You end up meeting most of the neighborhood eventually. Broken bones, flu seasons, holiday cooking accidents, you name it, I've treated it. And they remember you, Thomas observed. That says something about the kind of care you provide. Andre hadn't thought of it that way before. He'd always just done his job the best he could, treating each patient with the respect and attention they deserved. As they ate their burgers and fries, Thomas shared stories from his business days, deals gone wrong, partnerships that flourished against all odds, lessons learned the hard way. He spoke with the easy confidence of someone who had seen it all, yet there was no arrogance in his manner. The thing about money, Thomas said between bites, is that it's just a tool. No different than a hammer or a scalpel. It's how you use it that matters. Andre nodded, thinking about his own modest savings, enough for emergencies but nowhere near what he'd need to fund his clinic dream. After lunch, they headed to the garage to pick up Thomas's car. The mechanic confirmed that beyond the dented bumper, there had been no serious damage. The bill came to just under $400, which Thomas paid without complaint. Well, Thomas said as they stood beside the freshly washed Cadillac, I suppose this is where we part ways. Andre felt an unexpected sadness. In just 2 days, he'd grown fond of the old man's company. Drive safely. And call me when you get to your sister's so I know you made it okay. Thomas smiled, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Andre. My personal number is on the back. Call me anytime, day or night. Andre glanced at the card. It was simple, elegant cream cardstock with just a name. Thomas Grant. No title, no company, no fancy logo. He turned it over and saw a phone number written in neat handwriting. I meant what I said about your clinic idea, Thomas continued. Think about letting me make those calls. Sometimes all a good idea needs is the right introduction. I will, Andre promised, tucking the card carefully into his wallet. They shook hands, Thomas's grip firm despite his age. Then with a final wave, the old man got into his car and drove away, leaving Andre standing alone in the parking lot. The apartment felt strangely empty that evening. Andre found himself missing the sound of Thomas moving around the kitchen, the thoughtful conversations, even the way the old man folded the newspaper with precise creases after finishing the crossword. He was just about to heat up leftovers for dinner when his phone rang. It was Thomas. Made it to my sister's safely, the old man reported. Thought you'd want to know. Thanks for calling, Andre said, genuinely relieved. How's your sister doing? About the same, Thomas replied. But she's a fighter. Always has been. There was a pause, then. Listen, Andre, I've been thinking more about our conversations. Would you be willing to email me that folder of yours? The one with all your clinic plans? Andre hesitated only briefly. Sure, I can do that. What's your email? Thomas gave him an address, and Andre promised to send the files that evening. One more thing, Thomas said before hanging up. I took the liberty of calling the realtor about that building. Just to get some information. You did what? Andre asked, surprised. Just gathering facts, Thomas assured him. The owner is motivated to sell. The building's been vacant too long. Might be room for negotiation on the price. After they hung up, Andre sat staring at his phone, a mix of emotions washing over him. Part of him was touched by Thomas's interest in his dream. Another part felt a twinge of discomfort at how quickly things were moving. Still, he opened his laptop and compiled all his clinic documents into a single folder, which he emailed to Thomas as promised. Whatever came of it, he figured it couldn't hurt to share his vision. The next day, Andre returned to work at the hospital. The emergency room was as chaotic as ever, understaffed, overcrowded, with patients waiting hours to be seen. He fell back into his routine, the brief respite with Thomas already feeling like a distant memory. A week passed with no word from the old man. Andre began to wonder if Thomas had simply been making polite conversation, with no real intention of helping with the clinic project. He couldn't blame him. After all, they'd only known each other for 2 days. Why would a stranger go out of his way to help? Then, 10 days after Thomas had left, Andre received a text message while on his break at the hospital. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? There are some people I'd like you to meet. Regarding your clinic. Andre stared at his phone in disbelief. Thomas had actually followed through. With slightly shaking hands, he typed a reply. Yes, I'm off tomorrow. Where and when? The response came quickly. Noon, Westwood Financial Building downtown. 2nd floor. Just give your name at the reception desk. Andre knew the Westwood building. It was one of the most prestigious office towers in the city, home to law firms, investment companies, and corporate headquarters. What kind of connections did Thomas have to get a meeting there? That night, Andre could barely sleep. He dug out his best suit, rarely worn except for job interviews and funerals, and laid it out carefully. He reviewed his clinic plans, rehearsing how he might explain his vision to potential investors. What had started as a distant dream suddenly felt terrifyingly possible. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Andre couldn't help but wonder, who exactly was Thomas Grant? And why had the old man taken such an interest in him and his community clinic dream? He had no way of knowing that the answer would change his life forever. Andre tugged at his tie nervously as the elevator climbed toward the 32nd floor. His suit, rarely worn, felt stiff and foreign compared to his usual scrubs. The mirrored walls of the elevator reflected a man he hardly recognized, clean-shaven, hair neatly trimmed, looking every bit the professional businessman rather than the overworked ER nurse he was. What was he doing here? The Westwood Financial Building housed some of the most powerful companies in the city. People like him didn't take meetings on the 32nd floor. People like him patched up the rich executives who worked here when they showed up at the ER with stress-induced heart problems. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open to reveal a reception area that screamed money. Gleaming marble floors, abstract art on the walls, fresh flowers arranged in massive vases. The logo on the wall read, Harrington Health Investments in elegant silver lettering. "May I help you?" asked the receptionist, a young woman with perfect posture and an equally perfect smile. "Andre Wilson," he said, surprised his voice didn't crack. "I have a lunch meeting with Thomas Grant." A flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Of course, Mr. Wilson, we've been expecting you." She stood, gesturing toward a hallway. "This way, please." Andre followed her through a maze of hallways, past glass-walled offices where well-dressed people talked on phones and studied computer screens. The place hummed with purpose and power. The receptionist stopped at a large conference room and opened the door. "Mr. Wilson has arrived," she announced. Andre stepped inside and froze. Seated around a massive oval table were 5 people in expensive suits, all looking at him with interest. And at the head of the table, looking completely at home, was Thomas, except he wasn't dressed in the simple, slightly worn clothes Andre remembered. Today, Thomas wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Andre made in a month. His white hair was freshly cut and a gold watch glinted on his wrist. "Andre," Thomas stood, walking over with a warm smile and extended hand. "Right on time." Come in, come in." Andre shook his hand automatically, mind racing to make sense of the scene. Thomas looked different, not just the clothes, but his entire demeanor. The slightly frail old man from the snowstorm had been replaced by someone who radiated confidence and authority. "Everyone," Thomas said, turning to the group, "this is Andre Wilson, the nurse I told you about. Andre, meet the board of Harrington Health Investments." One by one, the board members introduced themselves. A corporate lawyer, a hospital administrator, a tech entrepreneur, a medical equipment supplier, and a finance executive. Each shook Andre's hand firmly, studying him with undisguised curiosity. "Please sit." Thomas gestured to an empty chair beside his own. "We've ordered lunch." As if on cue, servers entered with trays of gourmet sandwiches, salads, and sparkling water. Andre sat, feeling increasingly disoriented. He glanced at Thomas, who gave him a reassuring nod. "Before we dig in," Thomas said, addressing the group, "I want to thank you all for coming on such short notice. As I mentioned in my emails, I believe we have an extraordinary opportunity before us." The board members nodded, their attention shifting between Thomas and Andre. "For those who don't know," Thomas continued, 10 days ago I found myself in a rather precarious situation. My car slid off the road during that massive blizzard we had. No phone service, temperatures well below freezing." He shook his head. "Not a good scenario for a man my age," the group murmured sympathetically. Andre here happened to drive by. He could have kept going. Most people would have. Instead, he stopped, helped me into his car, and when no hotels were available, opened his home to a complete stranger. Thomas looked at Andre with genuine warmth. That alone speaks volumes about his character. Andre shifted uncomfortably under the group's scrutiny. "But what truly impressed me," Thomas went on, "was learning about Andre's vision for a community health clinic in his neighborhood. He showed me the area, explained the local needs, and shared his detailed plans." Thomas tapped a folder in front of him. Andre recognized it as a printed version of the files he'd emailed. "I've reviewed these materials thoroughly, and I'm convinced this is exactly the kind of project Harrington Health should be supporting." The board members began flipping through copies of the folder. Andre's heart pounded. What was happening here? Who was Thomas, really? And what was Harrington Health Investments? "Andre," the hospital administrator said, studying one of his spreadsheets, "these projections for patient load and service costs are quite thorough. How long have you been developing this plan?" "About 3 years," Andre replied, finding his voice. "I've been tracking the types of preventable emergencies we see at the hospital, cases that could have been avoided with basic primary care." The group nodded, seeming impressed. More questions followed about staffing needs, equipment requirements, potential partnerships with the hospital. Andre answered as best he could, gradually finding his confidence as he spoke about the project he'd poured his heart into for years. Throughout the discussion, Thomas remained mostly silent, watching Andre with what looked like pride. The board members were engaged, asking thoughtful questions rather than trying to poke holes in his plan. Finally, the finance executive spoke up. Thomas, you're proposing an initial investment of how much? $2 million, Thomas replied without hesitation. That covers the building purchase, renovations to meet medical facility codes, equipment, and operating expenses for the first year. Andre nearly choked on his water. $2 million? He'd estimated he would need about half that, and even that had seemed an impossible amount to raise. And the return model? The executive pressed. This wouldn't be a pure profit play, Thomas said firmly. We'd structure it as part of our social impact portfolio. That said, I believe Andre's model of sliding scale payments and targeted insurance billing could make the clinic self-sustaining within 3 years, with modest returns after that. He smiled. Plus the tax advantages, of course. The board members exchanged glances, having some sort of silent conversation Andre couldn't interpret. We'd want to establish clear governance, the lawyer said, while maintaining the community-focused mission. Thomas nodded. Naturally. I propose Andre as executive director, with operational autonomy within agreed parameters. Quarterly oversight from the board. Andre's head was spinning. They were discussing this as if it were actually happening, as if his dream might become reality in the very near future. After about an hour, Thomas stood. I know you all need time to review the details. Why don't we reconvene next week for a formal vote? In the meantime, Andre and I have some things to discuss. The board members agreed, gathering their materials. Each shook Andre's hand again on their way out, several mentioning they looked forward to working with him. When the room was empty except for the two of them, Andre turned to Thomas. What just happened? Who are you really? Thomas sighed, the confident businessman persona softening slightly. I owe you an explanation, don't I? He gestured to the chairs. Let's sit. Andre sat, waiting as Thomas seemed to gather his thoughts. My full name is Thomas Harrington Grant, he began. I founded Harrington Health Investments 35 years ago. We started as a small medical equipment company and grew into what you see today, investments across the healthcare spectrum, from technology to service delivery. Andre's mind raced. Harrington, one of the largest healthcare investment firms in the country. He'd read about them in industry news. He struggled to find the right words. You're not just some retired guy. Thomas laughed softly. Not exactly, no. Though I am technically retired from day-to-day operations. My nephew runs most of the business now. So that night in the snow, your car was genuinely stuck and I was genuinely in trouble. Thomas finished for him. I was driving myself to my sister's place because I prefer to drive rather than have a chauffeur. Always have. Andre shook his head, trying to process this revelation. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Thomas's expression grew thoughtful. When you pulled over that night, you didn't help me because I was Thomas Harrington, billionaire investor. You helped me because I was a human being in trouble. He paused. Do you know how rare that is in my world? To be seen simply as a person, not a walking bank account or a connection to be leveraged? Andre hadn't considered that perspective. Those 2 days in your apartment talking about your life, your work, your dreams for that clinic. That was the most genuine interaction I've had with someone in years. Thomas leaned forward. I didn't tell you who I was because I wanted to understand you. The real you, without my wealth changing the equation. Andre nodded slowly, beginning to understand. When you showed me your clinic plans, I knew immediately they had merit, Thomas continued. But more importantly, I knew you were the right person to make it happen. Your compassion, your understanding of the community's needs, your practical experience in emergency care. Those things can't be bought or taught. So this meeting, today, Andre gestured around the conference room, was me making good on my promise to introduce your project to potential investors. Thomas smiled, though in this case the investors happened to be my company. Andre took a deep breath, still struggling to absorb the reality of his situation. And the $2 million? Is that real? Very real, Thomas confirmed. Subject to board approval, of course, but I rarely bring projects to them unless I'm confident of a yes vote. He pushed a folder across the table. This contains the preliminary terms. Salary for you as executive director, governance structure, funding schedule. Take it home. Review it. Have a lawyer look at it if you wish. Andre stared at the folder. A physical manef. Station of his dreams suddenly within reach. Why? He asked finally. Why me? Why this project? Thomas was quiet for a moment before answering. Because 30 minutes in a snowstorm showed me your character. 2 days in your apartment showed me your vision. And sometimes, Andre, when the right person meets the right opportunity at the right time, something extraordinary can happen. He smiled. Consider it my way of saying thank you for saving an old man's life. As Andre left the Westwood building that afternoon, folder tucked securely under his arm, he stepped into the bright sunshine feeling as though he'd entered an alternate reality. The city looked the same, but his place in it had fundamentally changed. His phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Dinner next week to celebrate? Bring your lawyer. Andre smiled, typing back, I don't have a lawyer. The response came quickly. You do now. Her name is Diana Chen, best in the business. She'll call you tomorrow. This is happening, Andre. Your community needs this clinic. You ready? Looking up at the clear blue sky, Andre took a deep breath. Was he ready? To leave the security of his hospital job? To take on the challenge of building something from scratch? To partner with a billionaire who had seen something in him worth investing in? Ready, he texted back, and headed home to begin planning the next chapter of his life. 6 months later, Andre stood in front of the renovated building, keys in hand, hardly believing his eyes. What had once been a vacant storefront was now the Wilson Community Health Center, its fresh blue and white sign gleaming in the morning sunlight. Through the large windows he could see the bright, welcoming waiting area, complete with comfortable chairs and a children's play corner. Nervous? Asked Thomas, standing beside him. The older man had become a fixture in Andre's life over the past months, guiding him through the complex process of establishing the clinic. Terrified, Andre admitted with a laugh. But in a good way. Thomas nodded knowingly. That feeling never goes away, you know. Not even after decades of launching new ventures. It's how you know you care. Today was the grand opening. In less than an hour, the doors would officially open to the public for the first time. Already a small crowd had gathered, curious neighbors, local officials, and media representatives drawn by the unusual story of how the clinic came to be. The 6 months since that meeting at Harrington Health had been a whirlwind. The board had unanimously approved the funding, setting in motion a flurry of activity. Andre had given his notice at the hospital, though he still picked up occasional shifts to maintain his skills and connections. With Thomas's guidance, he'd hired a small but capable staff, 2 other nurses, a physician assistant, a receptionist, and a community outreach coordinator. The building renovation had been completed in record time, with Thomas personally overseeing the contractors. No expense had been spared in creating a state-of-the-art facility that still felt warm and welcoming. Modern exam rooms, a small laboratory for basic tests, up-to-date equipment, and a dedicated education space for health workshops and classes. Time to go inside, Thomas prompted gently. Your staff is waiting. Inside, Andre's team was making final preparations. Despite their different backgrounds, they shared his vision for community healthcare. He'd been surprised how many qualified professionals had jumped at the chance to work at the center, even with modest salaries. Like him, they were drawn to the opportunity to practice medicine in a way that prioritized patient care over profit. As he gathered them for a final pep talk before opening, Andre felt a surge of gratitude. 6 months ago, he'd been an exhausted ER nurse with a folder full of dreams. Now he stood in his own clinic, surrounded by people who believed in his vision. I know we've gone over the protocols and procedures 100 times, he told his team, but I want to remind everyone of our core mission. We're here to provide quality healthcare to people who might otherwise go without. That means treating everyone who walks through that door with respect and dignity, regardless of their ability to pay. He looked around at the nodding faces. Some days will be challenging. We'll be understaffed and overwhelmed, but what we're doing here matters. At exactly 9 a.m., Andre unlocked the front door, and Thomas cut the ceremonial ribbon stretched across the entrance. Applause erupted from the gathered crowd as local news cameras captured the moment. The first patient arrived less than 5 minutes later, a middle-aged woman with uncontrolled diabetes who had been rationing her insulin due to cost. By noon, all 3 exam rooms were in constant use, with more patients waiting. Word had spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, bringing in people who hadn't seen a doctor in years. Andre moved between rooms, consulting with his staff, helping where needed. He noticed Thomas sitting quietly in the waiting area, observing everything with a slight smile. The billionaire had insisted on staying for the full first day, though he'd promised not to interfere with operations. Around 1 p.m., a local reporter cornered Andre for a brief interview. "This clinic is quite an achievement," she said, microphone in hand. "Can you tell our viewers how it came about?" Andre glanced at Thomas, who gave him an encouraging nod. They had discussed how to handle the inevitable media interest, agreeing to share their story in hopes of inspiring similar initiatives elsewhere. "It started during last winter's big snowstorm," Andre explained. "I was driving home from a hospital shift when I spotted a stranded motorist on the side of the road." He recounted the rescue, the 2 days of shelter, and the friendship that had formed, carefully omitting any mention of Thomas's wealth or company position. "And that stranded motorist turned out to be?" the reporter prompted, clearly knowing the answer already. "Thomas Harrington," Andre acknowledged, though I didn't know that at the time. To me, he was just Thomas, a kind older gentleman who took a genuine interest in my dream of opening a community clinic. "And Mr. Harrington, what made you decide to invest in this project?" the reporter asked, turning to Thomas, who had joined them. Thomas considered the question carefully. "When you reach my age, you develop a sense for recognizing authentic goodness." Andre stopped that night not because he had anything to gain, but because it was the right thing to do. He placed a hand on Andre's shoulder. "The clinic was his vision long before I came along. I simply provided resources to make it happen." The reporter seemed touched by this response. "So it was a case of one good deed leading to another?" "Something like that," Andre smiled. "Though I never expected anything in return for helping Thomas. I certainly never imagined it would lead to all this." After the reporter left, Thomas pulled Andre aside. "You're doing wonderfully," he said. "The place is already having an impact." Andre nodded, glancing around at the busy waiting room. "I just hope we can sustain it. The grant covers the first year, but after that, you'll find a way," Thomas assured him. "Between the sliding scale payment model and the partnerships you're building with the hospital and local businesses, I have no doubt this place will thrive long term." He gave Andre a knowing look. "And if you need additional support, you know how to reach me." By closing time at 6 p.m., the center had seen 37 patients, far more than they had anticipated for their first day. The staff was exhausted but exhilarated. They had provided vaccinations to children who were behind on their schedules, adjusted medications for elderly patients who couldn't afford their prescriptions, diagnosed several cases of hypertension, and scheduled follow-up appointments for chronic conditions that had gone untreated for too long. As the last patient left, Thomas brought out a surprise: champagne and plastic cups for a small celebration. "To the Wilson Community Health Center," he toasted, raising his cup. "And to its founder, a man who stopped to help a stranger and changed his community in the process." The staff cheered, clinking their cups together. Andre felt a lump form in his throat as he looked around at what they had created together. Later, after the others had gone home, Andre and Thomas sat in the now quiet waiting room, reflecting on the day. "I've been thinking," Thomas said, swirling the last of his champagne, "about that night in the snowstorm." "What about it?" Andre asked. "I've always considered myself a self-made man," Thomas continued. "Built my business from nothing, made my own way in the world. But that night..." He paused. "That night I was completely helpless. If you hadn't stopped, I might not have survived." Andre shook his head. "Anyone would have stopped." "No," Thomas said firmly. "They wouldn't have. And that's the point. We like to think of success as something we achieve entirely on our own. But the truth is, we all need help sometimes." He gestured around the clinic. "What you've created here, it's remarkable. But it's also a reminder that none of us truly makes it alone." Andre nodded slowly, understanding the deeper meaning behind Thomas's words. "I guess we all need saving sometimes." "Indeed we do," Thomas agreed. "The trick is being willing to accept the help when it's offered, and then finding ways to pass it on." As they locked up the clinic that evening, Andre took one last look at the sign bearing his name. 6 months ago, he'd been a burned-out nurse with a folder full of dreams. Now he was the director of a clinic that would help thousands of people in his community, all because he'd stopped to help a stranded old man in the snow. Over the years that followed, the Wilson Community Health